Welcome to another episode of Secure Insights, the podcast where we bring you stories and experiences from cybersecurity experts around the globe. I'm your host, Nick Kebbell, and today I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Michael Perdunn, Director of Advisory Services for Cyber Defense Labs based in Texas, USA. In this episode, we'll discuss the impact of communication on business cybersecurity, Michael's career journey in the industry, common themes in ransomware attacks, the importance of preventative cybersecurity and raising awareness around this, the role of AI, and advice for aspiring cybersecurity professionals. Stay tuned for valuable insight from Michael's extensive experience in the ever-evolving cybersecurity landscape. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining Secure Insights. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Nick, for having me.
Pleasure. So you're the Director of Advisory Services at Cyber Defense Labs based out in Dallas. We always start, if you could just maybe give us an overview of your journey, how you got into cybersecurity and sort of how you ended up to where you are now, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. So I always start my journey, kind of how I got into cybersecurity, with project management. I was a project manager for about 15 years and was managing all sorts of different projects, not in the security space. And I ended up at a university system, and the CISO there at the time needed some help managing some security projects, getting some things done. Some of the things back then were like, implementing MFA across the entire campus, across all of our students, faculty, and staff. So major initiative. And he knew at the time that he needed some project management support on that and asked me to come and support him on that. And what started out as one project over the course of several months turned into everything that I was doing. And I really credit him with getting me into security. And since then, I've never looked back. I've continued to kind of grow in my security knowledge and helping teams grow their maturity. And that's really been kind of the foundation for me the whole time, is a strong background in project management and being able to see kind of how those dots connect together across people, process, and technology.
Sure, brilliant. Okay. And in terms of the role that you're in at the moment then, so you came from sort of project background, I guess, because we're always keen to share people's stories, how they broke into cybersecurity, and quite a few people that maybe got into it by accident. They were in the right place at the right time or the wrong time or whatever, which way you look at it. But how did you get to that role where you're in now? How did that happen?
Sure, yeah. So kind of flashing back to the university system, had an opportunity to step back into consulting from the university and was helping a couple of clients, work on a number of different projects, right? Build an identity management program, respond to some incidents that they had kind of post breach, and help them with all of a sudden they have all these priorities, and having somebody that understands how to get things done, how to organize teams, was really valuable at the time. And so had an opportunity to come in, work with a number of clients in that space. Ended up landing at Omaha Public Power District, which is an energy company based here in Omaha, Nebraska. And I actually landed there to help them with some Department of Defense compliance work that they had. And while I was there, they had an opening to come in and manage the program and manage the team. And I knew the leader in this space really well. Him and I had gone back, many, many years. And I really trusted him. And so it was a great opportunity for me. And so I was definitely willing to say yes. And so from there, I was on the energy side for a number of years, had an opportunity to come up on the transportation side at Warner Enterprises. Decided to take the chance to move in a little bit of a different direction, different sector, different feel, being on the public side, publicly traded side, and really enjoyed it. Really challenging environment on the transportation side. Very, very up and down in terms of, kind of the economic swings that go up. Trucking is up, and when economic times, go down, it goes down really fast as well. And so really a challenging environment, really enjoyed my time there. But Cyber Defense Labs came into the picture. They're somebody that I had kept my eye on all the way back at Omaha Public Power District. I had come across them. At the time, they had a security operations area. They were a managed service security provider at the time. And so we were looking for some support in that area. And so they came across my radar. We didn't end up going with them, but I really liked their approach. I really liked the leadership team at the time. And so I kept my eye on them, and they had an opening to come in and help build their advisory practice. They were really leaning into this idea of proactive security. We've got a number of former law enforcement, and they really have this idea that they don't want to be coming in putting out fires anymore. They've spent the vast majority of their career doing that, and they really want to get into this proactive security approach. And so they really wanted to build a strong advisory practice, and so I was excited to come in and help them build something that would really help companies stay out of the problems that we've all kind of been in, help us kind of do the things that are necessary to keep you out of the bad guys' way, and keep them from getting what they want to at the end of the day.
Yeah, nice. Okay, good story. Thanks for that. And I guess so. With that, segues nicely into what are you seeing out there at the moment from a sort of a ransomware attack? What's the sort of the common theme?
Yeah, I think what we see a ton of, and what we kind of help clients with, just goes back to kind of the basics, right? And I say that, but with the caveat of saying that every time you come up with a defensive measure, somebody on the other side, the bad guys, are coming up with a way to defeat that. And so you're seeing that within multi-factor authentication this year, especially kind of coming in the last couple of years. But I think this year we've really seen SMS and even push-based multi-factor authentication begin to be not good enough anymore for companies to rely on, right? I can tell you we've responded to 5 companies this year alone who've had push-based authentication for MFA, and each time somebody on their side has acknowledged that push-based authentication and let a bad guy in. And that's for a number of reasons, right? There's too much of it, right? The way that we've implemented MFA on every login means that you're just inundated with these push notifications. And so you can't decipher what's a good, kind of push notification that I would expect from a bad one. And I think that gives somebody a foothold, right? And so from there, once somebody is in the door, so many organizations spend so much energy at the big, heavy walls of the organization, but very little time segmenting their network, segmenting computers from each other, not allowing that communication, and really creating a network that would not allow a piece of ransomware to move laterally across their network, right? And so your listeners will know responding to one laptop that has ransomware on it is very different responding from all laptops that have ransomware on it. And so if you're continuing to focus with this assumption that you'll never be breached, and we're going to continue to lean into putting more and more energy at the edge without or at the expense of making sure that we're resilient on the inside, then it only takes that one person to acknowledge that push notification. It only takes that one person to click on a phishing link. It only takes one person to give their credential away before all of that is undone. And so that's what I see as the real change, is that ransomware isn't going away, right? And it's not really changing tactics. It's changing the way that they're delivering that mechanism, to us as companies. And we're still struggling to really defeat that. Otherwise, we wouldn't see the amount of ransomware that we saw. Last year was a record year for ransomware. And so even, 5, 6, 7 years on in this battle, we still haven't figured out the right pattern and the right defenses to put in from start to finish.
Yeah, and like you said, you touched on it. Last year was record payout, I think, for ransomware. But I also read maybe that only 29% actually made payment out, and there was organisations that are sort of holding firm and not. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's multifaceted. I think the federal government on the US side is being more aggressive on this action. There are a number of ransomware variants that have decryption codes available for the US government. And so working with your, kind of local, state, and federal, law enforcement when something comes up can pay real dividends and keep you out of needing to pay. I think organizations are also taking backup and recovery more seriously. And so that makes it a lot easier for an organization to say, yeah, we've had ransomware and it's been really devastating, but we have the ability to get back up in X amount of time. And that's enough to get us back to where we need. And so I think those things are some big players in that space. I think also organizations, because they're moving to more cloud native, structures, they're much more likely to be able to take the hit and spin something back up. And they may lose some data. I've definitely worked with some clients who have lost, some important data, but they're back up and running quickly, and they're able to, take that hit and get back to business.
Yeah, because DSPM, data security posture management, is a big thing at the moment, isn't it, in the US?
Absolutely.
And maybe that would be a slight game changer in some of these attacks. So you touched on what companies perhaps need to do more of to stay ahead. If you bring sort of training programs into that, and you mentioned at the very beginning that you guys are sort of trying to be that sort of preventative security company. Do you think that there's enough training still happening out there? Do you think organizations are still taking that seriously? And if they are, do you think that they're working?
I think just about every company has a training program set up at this point. I think your question of whether or not they're effective is the right one to be asking. And I think organizations should be asking that. And I think the interesting thing here is you've got a bunch of folks who are setting up adult training and development programs, oftentimes without engaging with maybe their stakeholders in the organization that have a background in that, whether that's in HR or another area. There are oftentimes in organizations people who have a background in training and development who are putting together your onboarding program, training on, on the job training or any other aspect of that. But I think also that's an area that takes a specialization, right? Training adults and getting them to understand and getting that, to be able to take those away and design a program around learning objectives is complicated. That's hard work. It's not just, conducting a phishing exam and sending somebody to a 30-minute video and expecting them to take it all away. I think we in the security world feel like, oh, this is just simple stuff. It's normal stuff. And so people should just know. And I think we kind of bang our heads against that training wall, and we want to deliver more and more training to people who maybe fall victim for a phishing attack, as opposed to stopping to figure out, is the training we're delivering effective? Is it timely? Is that why people are failing? Is the content related to the reason that they fell for a phish? There are a number of reasons for that. And I think some of that is slowing down, asking the right questions of those people, getting involved, kind of one-on-one for those people who may be, kind of multi-victims, high risk, kind of folks, interviewing them and talking with them about, kind of what they're seeing. Oftentimes it's not the fish that is catching them, it's the speed at which we're asking people to move throughout their day. And that has nothing to do with security, but we have to secure in that environment. So if people are getting, hundreds of emails a day and they're having to move through them, faster and faster all the time, then the likelihood that they're going to fall for a fish when it comes in, they're not going to have time to examine it. They're not going to have time to go through this checklist of things. So what is the technology that we can put into place to limit that? And then how do we make sure that people can see the red flags for what they are when they come up? And how can we train people to understand those moments that are high risk for them, right? So for instance, I'm sitting on a meeting and I'm multitasking on my email. That should be a high risk moment for them. They should understand that. I'm sitting on my phone and I'm scrolling through email, trying to get through, just delete, or keep up on emails. That should be a high risk moment for me. And I should flag that in my head, as I shouldn't be clicking on things, in this moment, right? If we kind of think about it in kind of that, kind of physical safety approach, right? Everybody should have an opportunity to kind of, put out their work stoppage and say, hey, this is an unsafe practice. I should stop what I'm doing and delay that until I can think properly, until I have the information that I need. And I think those things are in all combination right, have to happen in order to move the needle on kind of the training and development side of the house.
Yeah. Okay. And AI is truly here now. Have you seen any kind of impact? Because it was a big topic last year, and we're nearly halfway through 2024 already. My gosh, have you seen any kind of sort of new techniques that are happening that are sort of AI based and driven by the bad guys?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Nick. AI is here, it's on us. I think a lot of organizations are trying to get their arms around what this means for them. And the advice that we give clients and that we start with when we're working on this problem with clients is to take an internal and an external approach, to this. What are your people doing on the inside to leverage AI for their work that may be exposing sensitive information, right? There was a insurance company that got a major fine last year because their folks were dropping kind of medical claim information into ChatGPT to help them write their claims letters, right?
Mm.
I think we can all put ourselves in that seat of, I've got hundreds of these letters that I got to write. Maybe ChatGPT can help me do that faster. The downside of it is it's exposing that medical information, right? So that's kind of an internal threat, right? So understanding what your people are doing on the inside with AI, right? As just one example. On the external side of the house, it's really understanding what your technology vendors on the security side are really doing with AI. Everybody is kind of bolting AI onto their technology right now. I think digging below the surface into what that really means, for the tool. How are they using that information? How are they using those models? What information are they taking from you in order to inform that model that they're using on the AI front? As we think about, kind of the bad guys and the bad actors, kind of out there, I think the speed at which we see new malware, kind of adjusted becomes quicker, right? And the barrier to entry becomes lower, right? Because now I don't need to be able to code. I don't need to be able to go out there or even, potentially buy, a good piece of ransomware, off the dark web. I can ask one of these models to help me out with that. And maybe that gets me 80% of the way, right? And then all I have to do is kind of dress it up a little bit to get it there. I think the speed at which that occurs happens so much faster. I think on kind of the phishing side, as an example, I think if you think about, we've really gotten to the point where these massive, kind of phishing campaigns where, hundreds of people in your organization are getting a phish are gone because our technology is really good at detecting that. So what are our users seeing? They're seeing things that are tailored for them. But if you think about that on kind of the threat actor side, that takes an immense amount of effort, time, energy, and investment to do something like that. But with AI, now I can ask that model to do some of that work for me, right? Hit all of your Facebook page, your LinkedIn page, and return me for these targets, right? Maybe, 30, 40 targets at a company, return me information that would be, relevant to them. Return me, conferences that they've gone to recently or posted about. And I'm going to use all of that information to help craft, kind of malicious email campaigns that are geared towards that person. But now I'm leveraging AI to kind of be a force multiplier for me in terms of the investigative part of it. And so now I take, an attack that might have been hundreds of hours in the making, and I turn that into dozens of hours. Now I can do that at a larger scale for more companies. And so those are the types of things that slip through our technology. And those are the things that AI will allow threat actors to do more often.
Yeah, so it's become more sophisticated. It'd be interesting to see how it all pans out over the next 12 months or so.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in terms of, so that all said, then in your opinion, how can organizations, I guess, test more robustly their instant response sort of processes? We talked about the training part of it, but in terms of sort of testing whether these, whether an attack, what they've got in place works, is there enough being done around that?
I think a lot of companies are kind of getting started with maybe conducting a tabletop exercise, which is a fantastic start. If you're not doing anything, conduct a tabletop exercise with your leadership team, conduct a tabletop exercise with your technical team. If you've got a managed service provider on the technology side, run a tabletop exercise and include them, because they're going to be vital to that response piece. That's a perfect, step number one. Step number two now is to up the ante there, right? Is maybe to run those things back to back, right?
Yep.
And now you're stitching together the technical and the management side, so that that whole incident starts to come together for the whole organization. Then it's about, beginning to test out those capabilities, right? So whether that's with a red team exercise, whether that's with a purple team exercise, where you're actually testing your blue team, your responsive and monitoring capabilities, to really understand, did you see that? I just executed this. Can you see this? When did you detect it? Now, what would be your process and procedure for responding to that? And so, as we're stepping to each rung of the ladder, we're really making that exercise feel more and more real for what an attack is going to look like.
Yep.
And also an understanding of what those capabilities will be like, all the way to the end of, hey, we're going to begin to take down production systems and spin them over on a regular basis to, a new area, maybe a hot backup that we have. Now that becomes really advantageous when something comes up. I know, because 2 months ago, we just did a restoration exercise and I was able to do it in, X number of hours. I know that I can do that again because it's tried and true.
Yep.
That's the difference, but that's a huge investment in time for organizations. And at some point, you get to the point of diminishing returns, but getting on that journey and starting to take the steps is what's important.
Yeah. Okay. And also post attack as well, having all your ducks in line.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So every time something comes through, I think conducting a lessons learned, activity. So in my previous roles, we've written into our incident response plan a lessons learned within 48 hours of, kind of the event closing, because we want to capture that information when it's still fresh in everybody's mind. And that's so important to understand root cause analysis, and then prioritize those things, prioritize them, get them on the roadmap, what failed, what controls didn't work as expected, and start to fix those things and start to drive the accountability that's necessary, so that if we fell for something a first time, we don't fall for it a second time.
Yeah. Okay. Have you got any stories that you're able to share in being in the type of role that you're in, without obviously name dropping, or any interesting situations that you've experienced?
I have an opportunity to work with, some amazing folks. Like I said, our CEO, Bob Anderson, has amazing stories. So I always feel like my stories pale in comparison, but I do enjoy talking about, kind of the critical infrastructure piece of it. I spent, a number of years, like I said, at Omaha Public Power District. And I think critical infrastructure is in the news a lot. And often I think we don't understand, kind of what the implication is, versus maybe other areas of security. And so I always like to talk about, kind of key events that came up geopolitically for us. And Omaha Public Power District is not a huge energy provider, across the nation, but it is a critical infrastructure provider. And so even for us, in our position here in little old Omaha, Nebraska, we were on the geopolitical, kind of radar. And so when events would come up around the globe, things are flaring up in the Middle East right now, and I don't have any inside knowledge as to, kind of what is happening on the ground for them, today. But back when I was there, we would see a spike in activity anytime something hit the news, like events that have occurred, this week over in Iran. We would see a spike in reconnaissance activity. We would see a spike in attempts to phish our users, or kind of password spraying events, or anything of the like. And that would go all the way, to kind of US elections. We would see those things, kind of begin to take an uptick. And I think that is something that everybody within those industries should have an understanding of, right? And people on the outside should understand that when people talk about, kind of adversaries trying to get into critical infrastructure, it is very real. It is absolutely very real. And the implications kind of in terms of life and safety and the world that we have created and the lifestyle that we are accustomed to is at threat. And I think there is a threat to that. And the more that we put those things online, the more that we, expose those things, and that is inevitable, by the way, the more risk there is to, a bad guy getting in and a bad guy taking, a bad guy and girl, taking those things down. And I think that is a risk. And I think that is an investment that we need to make, across the globe into, kind of hardening those systems and hardening those, kind of the way that we build those things so that, down the road, that's less of a threat. And we are seeing those things play out, within, areas like Ukraine, that there's such a great use case around the way that has been conducted and the way that critical infrastructure has been, targeted. And I think it's not difficult to say, hey, I can see that happening over there. It's don't think that can't happen here as well, right? Just because that is the sandbox today that those, threat actors are focused on, does not mean that that war won't go on forever. And those folks aren't just going to go, oh, well, it's done and over with, I guess I'm going back home. They're going to switch their efforts to, new areas. And I think the threat is real on that side of the house.
Yeah, and they're extremely sophisticated as well, aren't they? Thank you for that, Michael. So we love to, when we have sort of a complete different array of guests on the podcast, we really like just to share their biggest pieces of advice for the next generation coming through. We're big advocates just to try to pass anything down to entice the next gen coming through, because there's still that sort of shortage of people coming in, whether that's people coming out of universities and schooling or transferable skills, people in different sectors. What would be your kind of biggest piece of advice for breaking into cybersecurity today?
It's a fantastic question, Nick. I think there's a couple of different things that I would say. Number one is be willing to say yes. Be willing to say yes to something, even if you are not 100% sure, not 100% confident. Be willing to say, yes, let me give it a try. Let me jump into that. Let me see what I can do there. Because for me, that's been such a powerful opportunity for me to do things I would have never imagined I was doing now. If I would have, been kind of scared to jump into something new, scared to try something different, I'd still be in the lane that I was in. The second thing, I think, for security, the thing that I always ask about when I'm interviewing folks is, how do you show that you're being curious about things, right? For us on the security space, it's all about asking questions. It's all about being curious about why things work in the way that they work, right? And so it's often the times when we start digging into things that, oh, well, it's always been set up that way, or, oh, that alert always goes off, at that time. And asking the question of why, asking the question and being curious about that starts to get you under that, kind of first response for people, which is, what, I don't know. I haven't asked, I haven't dug into that, but it just always happens and nothing bad has happened, right? But asking, why and being curious helps you get under that surface and start to dig at the way that things are configured, the way that things talk to each other on a network, the way that, maybe threat actors, kind of are responding and changing, their tactics. I think being curious about those things is such a powerful thing in security, and makes anybody that comes into the space that much more powerful, because a lot of our job is to understand, why things work in the way that they work, so that we can help design controls effectively in order to protect the organization.
So with that, in terms of, because over the last sort of few years or so, we've had the creation of many job functions that didn't exist previously, because just generally the way cyber's evolved, and now we're at sort of this this AI revolution. If you were advising somebody who was either going into university with their sort of mindset of breaking into cyber, what route would you steer them towards, given all this sort of artificial intelligence, machine learning stuff's out there, and it's going to change the landscape potentially as to what type of job functions there will be in cyber? And of course there'll be more. There'll be, in 5 years' time, there'll be more that we don't even know what they're going to be yet. They'll evolve again, won't they?
Oh, absolutely. So I think to start to answer your question, if you're not playing with AI today, you should be, right? Be
Yeah.
curious about it. What is happening out there? What are these things doing? What are these things capable of doing today, right? And right now, I think to your point, they are in their infancy. What we have available on the commercial side is in
Yeah.
its infancy. And so thinking down the road, 5 or 6 years as folks, that may be just starting their career or becoming career security folks, that's important to have that understanding from the get-go. The other thing that I would say is a lot of folks that come into cybersecurity think about the Hollywood version of that, right? I'm going to be a, hacker breaking into something, and we have this romanticized version of, kind of what that looks like. But I think a lot of people forget the people side of it and the process side of it. And it really is, we talk a ton about, kind of the three legs of the stool around people, process, and technology. And understanding all three of those and the way that they interact is so vital. And so the thing that I would say to somebody that's interested in, kind of getting into, this industry is think about all three of those legs, right? It's the technology, absolutely, but it's also the people and how they're trained on it. Are they confident in using the technology? And then also the processes, right? For, answering an alert when it comes in, responding to, a threat when it comes up, and having those things all in combination means that an organization can be, really effective.
Yeah, and you touched on it, as many have. I mean, as much as you got all the new toolings and new technology evolving, as you've mentioned, but it still comes down to that communication piece, isn't it? So building your communication skills, your relationship building skills, keep them just as much as high up in order as everything else, because they go hand in
I
hand, don't they?
I I always joke with everybody. I came into technology through the back door. I do not have a background in technology. I probably couldn't code my way out of a paper bag. My university background is in communication and philosophy. And so it is something that I always think about in terms of how teams are communicating, how teams are connecting to each other, because oftentimes the technology problems are not complicated to solve for organizations. The
Mm,
problems that organizations have are often communication problems. They're often getting teams to work together, communicate across those silos, communicate across those divides, and really start to realize that you have a lot more in common with those different areas than you might think you have. And so breaking down those barriers so that teams can work effectively together to solve problems. The technology solution is often like somebody has that. They already know the one or two ways that we're going to solve that are going to be really effective for us. But it's getting the teams together, getting the people organized, getting everybody heading in the right direction, kind of rowing in the same direction so that we can make the progress that we need to make.
yeah, perfect advice. That's us, Michael. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate that. That's been fantastic. Thank you for sharing your experience and giving some advice on the next generation. And it's been great having you on, and wishing you a fantastic second part of the year. I can't believe we're saying that already, but almost heading up to mid-year, and a great second part of the year.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Nick.
Pleasure.